Floss Tube. I'm Jennifer and this is my channel, Stitching with the Waves. Welcome. Today I am just doing a quick video on a Petitpoint tutorial to explain the stitch that's used in Petitpoint. It's called Continental tent stitch, and I'm going to explain what it is, how it's different from a half cross stitch, and why you use Continental tent stitch in Petitpoint. So to start off with, I wanted to show you this project I have started real quickly. If you're interested in this project, it is from Sapphire Mountain Handcrafts. It's available on Etsy and it's called Stitching Book Club. So the idea is we read Pride and Prejudice as we stitch along in this stitch along. That made no sense, sorry. It's a stitch along, so we stitch a Pride and Prejudice themed piece while reading the book Pride and Prejudice. Okay, I will put a link in the description box to this project if you want to see. I'm stitching both versions of the stitch along. On the linen I have over here, I'm stitching the large project, and then on the silk gauze, I am stitching the mini version of the stitch along. So I chose this project to show you because I am stitching them both on 40 count background material. This one here, I am stitching on 40 count linen. So I'm going to give you a close-up look of that 40 count linen. And it takes, let me get a spot where they're stitching because it takes my camera just a second to focus. But you can see the individual linen fibers and the very tiny holes in this linen. Okay, so 40 count. So it means on this 40 count gauze, there's exactly the same number of holes per inch as there is in that linen. But look how thin the silk fibers are in this silk gauze compared to the linen fibers in the linen. You can tell because look how much larger the holes are in the silk gauze. I apologize, it's hard to hold perfectly still, so this is a little shaky. Now, if I tried to explain the Continental tent stitch and show you how to stitch on this silk gauze, it would be extremely difficult for you to see. So what I have done is borrow my 8-year-old's plastic canvas. So this is available in craft stores. You know, I think you can certainly do projects on it, stitch projects on it and cut it out. It's very stiff. It's great for kids learning how to stitch because you don't need a frame or anything. And the holes, if you'll notice, are very large compared to the linen where there's very small holes. This is much more similar to the silk gauze where the holes are very large compared to these individual plastic grid. So I'm going to use this to show you and explain the concept of the stitches that I'm showing today. I think it'll be a lot easier for you to see. So what I've done is here on the left, I have stitched half cross stitch, and here on the right, I have stitched Continental tent stitch. So you can see on the front, those stitches look exactly the same from the front side. They are just half cross stitches from one corner to the other, and they all run at the same diagonal angle next to each other. I assume most of you watching this are cross stitchers. That's probably how you originally found me, was through Floss Tube for cross stitch. So a half cross stitch is just the first leg of the X. You don't make the second leg, okay? Pretty simple concept. The difference in these two stitches is how you carry the thread across the back of the canvas when you're making the next stitch. So I'll show you what I mean in just a minute. Okay, this is a little awkward. I have to peek over the top of the camera so I can make sure. I hope I don't bump the tripod. I apologize if this is bumping around at all. All right, so we're going to start over here with the half cross stitch first. So for half cross stitch, you come up in the bottom right, bottom left. You guys, I'm terrible with right and left, so go with what you see me doing on the screen, not with what I'm saying. Okay, up in the bottom left, down in the top right. And I've made one half cross. Then same thing, we go straight down, we come up in the bottom left of the next stitch, and we go down in the top right. And I just keep doing that to fill in the remainder of this row. Okay, one more stitch here, up in the bottom left, down in the top right. So now I'm going to do the next row. So I'm going to, this time, to go back, I'm going to come up in the top right and go down in the bottom left. Up in the top right, down in the bottom left. Am I still on camera? Okay, good. It's a little hard to stitch and watch the camera at the same time. All right, up in the top right, down in the bottom left. So I think you guys get the idea of this stitch, and you're probably familiar with it if you're a cross stitcher. It's just making the first X of, making the first cross, the first leg of the X. All right, so let's move on to Continental tent stitch. So remember, it looks the same on the front, but the pattern of how we go up and down in the holes is what's different. So let me reorganize my brain so I remember which way we're going. All right, so I am moving from the left to the right on this row. So I'm going to do the opposite thing from the half cross. I am going to come up in the top right and down in the bottom left. Up in the top right, down in the bottom left. One more time to complete this row, up in the top right and down in the bottom left. Then to go down to the next row, again, the opposite of how you do half cross. So I'm going to go from right to left. I'm going to come up in the bottom right, down in the top left. Up in the bottom right, down in the top left. Up in the bottom right, down in the top left. So it's really, once you wrap your brain around which hole you need to be going up and down in, depending on whether you're moving to the right or to the left, it just starts to come pretty naturally to you, and it can go very quickly. All right, so I think that's enough from here. Do one more, up in the bottom right, up in the bottom left, down in the top right. Okay, so let's look at how that changes on the back. All right, I'm going to flip it this way, so the piece is now upside down, but I want to keep the half cross on the left here still. So again, you're probably familiar with this if you're a cross stitcher and you are trying to minimize your floss usage. On the back, you get vertical lines. This minimizes the amount of floss that you're carrying across the back of the project, so it maximizes what you're seeing on the front. You aren't wasting any of your floss. And that works great when you're working on Aida or linen or even weave, where the fibers of the fabric are fairly large relative to the size of the hole. The holes in those fabrics are fairly small compared to the fibers. Okay, then over here, the string out of the way. Okay, on this side with the Continental tent stitch, you end up carrying your thread across the back in a much longer diagonal. So with the half cross, you can see some of the plastic through. If you look very carefully, it's harder to see it on camera because the plastic is clear. But in between these stitches, you can see some of the plastic showing through. Over here, you can't see any. It has extremely good coverage. It almost looks as good as it does on the front. So using the Continental tent stitch on the silk gauze helps fill up the space in between the gauze. So when you look at it on the front, it looks very thick and full, and you don't see the silk gauze or the plastic canvas through the stitches. Over here, they just look a little more sparse, and you can see areas, particularly right in here, where you can see the silk gauze showing, you see the plastic canvas showing through. I put my hand behind it, you can kind of see some of my hand through that spot I had pointed out. If you come over here to the Continental tent stitch, you really can't. It's much fuller. Carrying that thread further across the back allows some of those threads in the back to give you better coverage. Okay, so that's the reason that we use Continental tent stitch on the silk gauze. And there are quite a few stitch diagrams out there that you can go and find, and they will draw out for you what hole to come up in, what hole to go down in. Like I said, once you kind of get into a rhythm of it and have done a few rows, you start to understand when I'm moving left to right, I need to come up in this hole and go down in that hole. When I'm moving back the other way from right to left, I come up here and go down there. And it just kind of starts to come naturally the more you do it. So I hope that helped clarify what the stitch is, how it's different from half cross, and why you use it for petite point. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I would be happy to answer. Remember, I am a fairly new petite point stitcher. I've only been working in this medium for about a year and a half, and I certainly do not know everything, but I do want to pass on the things I do know and try to help keep this hobby alive. It doesn't seem like there are as many people on FlossTube doing this type of stitching, and I would love to see more people join in. It's really fun, and you can make some amazingly detailed projects with it. So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon for a regular FlossTube video. Bye.